At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
24 chefs, 24 culinary showdowns for 24 hours straight. Which chef will outcook, outpace, outlast the competition?
No chef
Escapes the clock. Season premiere, 24 and 24, Last Chef Standing, Sunday, April 27th at 8. See it first on Food Network. Stream next day on Max.
There are people out there all across the country pushing boundaries to grow the game of golf. Like champion speed golfer Lauren Cupp, who plays faster than anyone else. And Will Lowry, whose work in the golf community inspires more kids to get into the game. As a champion partner of the Masters, Bank of America supports everyone determined to find out what's possible. In golf and in life. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America. Bank of America N.A. member FDIC, copyright 2025, Bank of America Corporation, all rights reserved.
Welcome to the Paddock and The Pavilion, probably the only podcast that brings you the best of both horse racing and cricket, with me, your host, Stephen Wallis. Joining us today is Vince van der Bijl, the former South African fast bowler, widely regarded as one of the finest cricketers never to play Test cricket, not through any lack of talent, but due to South Africa's isolation from international sport during the apartheid era. In 1980, Vince had a standout season with Middlesex, playing a key role in their county championship triumph and earning recognition as one of Wisden's 5 Cricketers of the Year. He reflects on that unforgettable year bowling at Lord's, the challenge of adapting to English conditions and being part of a side packed with internationals under the masterful leadership of Mike Brearley. It's a fascinating conversation with a man who has contributed enormously to the game, from past roles with Cricket South Africa and the ICC to his current work as the founder and managing director of MasiSports. Hello, Vince. Thank you for joining me on the Paddock and the Pavilion.
It's my pleasure, Stephen. Thank you for inviting me.
How are you today in Cape Town?
We're good, actually. No, it's been a nice day, as usual.
Well, on this podcast, we're going to talk about your memorable season with Middlesex in 1980. You made your first-class debut for listeners back in 1967 for the South African universities, and then you played for Natal. But how did you come to join Middlesex in 1980?
Well, it's an interesting one. I've been invited by Mr. Whiteley of Glamorgan to play there, but I just changed jobs. I packed up teaching because we couldn't really afford to live on a teacher's salary. So I was moving on to Wiggins Teep. I don't know what they call, I'm sure they're called Wiggins Teep now, a BAT company in paper merchanting. And because of my first year, I felt I couldn't really ask. So then JT Murray and Don Bennett came out because I knew them well from the Derek Robbins tours. They'd seen me bowl, and they came out and they managed to sweet talk Derek Smith, my then MD, because he was a Middlesex supporter in the famous the golden years of Edrich and Compton. And also the paper mills in England meant that I could stay over for a bit, which I did for about 2 weeks and learn about paper. Because I was a history and geography teacher, so I didn't know anything about paper. So I went to Stonywood in Aberdeen, went down to Basingstoke where their head office was, went down and saw Concro, their famous paper being made. And so developed relationships with Arthur Vincent, of all people, because he was the Wiggins Teep head of Ireland, and he used to be the chairman of Irish cricket, and he put me together with David Gower because David was somehow involved with their stationery setup. Don't ask me how. So it was all a sort of linkage thing, nothing more.
Had you played in England before then?
I played for Wolf Isaacs in 1969. Someone had pulled out, I popped in. I was 21 years old. I just made the Natal side. And, we had Johnny Waite on the tour, Don McCarr-Coggill, who were the oldies. I think Johnny was the main one. And we had a lot of youngsters, Penham Henwood. And we toured England, My favorite memory most probably, I managed to get a hat-trick at Taunton playing against, I think it was the Martlets. And the captain of the Martlets was Ingleby Mackenzie. It was a wonderful old bloke. And I managed to get a hat-trick. He was in the middle. So afterwards we were chatting. He's a very funny man. And he told this wonderful story about when he was captain of Hampshire, he was asked whether there was a curfew for Hampshire. And he said, yes, there is. It's 10 o'clock. And the guy asking him the question said, what do you mean 10 o'clock? That's very early. He said, well, we start playing at 11. So, you have all these memories of that. And we had a good team and we did well.
So then the lure of Lords brought you to play for Middlesex?
No. They asked me to play for Middlesex. Full stop. We didn't play at Lords. We played at the Oval. We played against Surrey. I'm pretty sure we didn't play at Lords. We played at Oxford. There were a lot of protests at that stage because things were getting hot, anti-South African rallies, etc. So the one against Ireland was pretty hectic. Then a few smoke bombs thrown at us. And I was lucky enough to see the Moonwalk in Dublin. That was 1969.
July.
So
yeah.
I wouldn't have seen that in South Africa because we didn't have TV. And we just had a wonderful tour. We were a bunch of youngsters having the time of our lives playing cricket against very good opposition.
So was 1980 then for you the right time to come to play in England then?
It's a difficult question to answer. My dad was a Springbok cricketer. He played in the timeless Test. He had a Test average of 51. He was a triple blue at Oxford. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He was in charge of 3 regiments in the war, and he came back and he was the head of Bishops, which is quite a sort of a private school here, highly regarded. And he was like an iconic figure. So I was always Peter's son as opposed to being Vincent, because he was so well known. And he always said to me 2 things. He said, number 1, cricket should always be your hobby. And number 2, don't take up teaching. Neither I regarded. So I took up teaching. And cricket was amateur then, of course. So the only time I ever got paid for cricket was, in fact, in Middlesex. And that made cricket fun. We developed incredibly strong relationships on the field. And it was different to that in England. I mean, the first game we played was at Notts. Derek Randall was playing. So as usual, as you would in South Africa, you take a carry pack through to the side that's been fielding. You pop into their dressing room for a drink. And the guys looked at me and said, what are you doing here? I said, I'm here for a drink. Well, he said, we don't do that here. We meet in the pub. So I sat next to Derek and we chatted because I knew him from Derek. So it was a very different environment. And so that was right at the end of my career. So that was 1980. I was 32. I retired 2 years later. I was overweight. Mike Brearley thought I wasn't the greatest choice because he didn't know me. And there were 5 West Indians in his team. He thought having a white South African would have set the balance of the culture of the team. And so I picked up something right in the beginning. He wasn't madly happy. And years later, when I was with the MCC World Cricket Committee, we met at the Taj, one of our meetings at India. And so I'm sitting next to Brearley. He's there. He's the chairman. He says, this is where it happened. I said, where, what happened? He said, no, I had a full go at Don Bennett and Gubby Allen for your selection because he hadn't been told. Because he was on tour, he hadn't been asked his opinion. So that was interesting. And then, during the year, we developed an incredibly strong friendship, which we still have today.
So the Middlesex team you joined, you didn't know any of the players?
Oh, I played, let's have a look. I don't think so. Might have played against Rad for Derek Robbins. But the Middlesex team was interesting. You had 5 West Indians. You had old Lord Philip Edmonds, who was always slightly different. You had John Embry. You had Ian Gould. You had Mike Smith. You had the great Clive Radley, Fat Gat, or as we used to call him, Mike Gatting when he was young. Mike Selvey, Wayne Daniel, obviously Black Diamond. Raj Maru came through that period. Simon Hughes, Yoza came through that period. Graham Barlow was there. So we had this mixture. It wasn't just a mixture of people from different areas. I can't describe it as a mixture of different cricketers. Embers was always quite keen to get maidens, even though he took lots of wickets. Phil was always trying to bowl the perfect delivery. Wayne Daniel was just a nightmare to face. He was fantastic. Mike Selvey was dropped halfway through, and Yoza took his place. Gat bowled a few overs. And then you had the mixture, it was funny. It was people from wealthy areas, from non-wealthy areas. You had some of which in the old days would have been called the amateurs, and then the players. Someone like Mike Brearley would have been amateur, and Phil Edmonds, I guess. The rest would have been players. Fred Titmus played 3 times with us. So he became the first guy who played 5 decades.
Yeah.
So, I was with him at what's that place, Scarborough, and that's an interesting story about Roland, because Roland was feeling it mid-on. Roland Butch, we used to call him the Hoover, because he picked up everything with, nothing missed his hand when he went to field it. And Phil Carrick came into bat as a good player of spin. And Fred hadn't taken a wicket in the first innings. He had arrived at what you would call plimsolls in those days. So he hadn't taken a wicket in the first innings. I thought it was quite stressful. For some reason, I was in leg gully. Do me a favor. I don't know why, because I never fielded there. And he threw one up to Phil, and Phil came down the wicket and hit a line drive like you've never seen. And Butch, the Hoover, took 2 yards to his right, dived absolutely full length, and took an incredible catch. I immediately ran down to Fred. I knew how relieved he was. He said, "Well bowled, Fred." And Fred, with his normal dry humor, said, "Oh, yes, I just gave that a bit more air." How lovely is that, So Fred Titmus.
So when you arrived, did you set yourself targets of how many wickets you thought you'd get?
No, God, no, I don't. I don't do targets. I do trying to be the best I can be and try and be the best in the championship. So when I arrived, I was overweight. I was 32 years old. I hadn't bowled for a bit because I'd been injured before. And the first thing we did was go to have a friendly soccer match. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I turn like the Queen Mary, so soccer's not my game. You've got Ian Gould, Gunner there. Everyone else is whisking around because they played it all their lives. Soccer's not our sport. Rugby is, and later soccer became a sport for ours. And they must have looked at this bloke and thought, what have we got here? And I met Brearley that day, and I could see he was uncomfortable. There's a photograph in my book of it. So you could see I was uncomfortable. Anyway, but what Mike did was, as he always did, he welcomed everyone in. He almost took you through a process to check how good you were. So there was no judgment. He doesn't really remember this, but it's true. So he used to bowl me first change. Then he opened the bowling. Then I had to bowl after lunch. Then I bowled the next day. Then I bowled long spells. Then I bowled short spells. And I was taking wickets, so I was doing okay. And I eventually said to Mike, "Are you happy yet?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You've been putting me through the paces. It's obvious. So when a tight situation comes, you know if I can bowl in it. It's unbelievable captaincy. I mean, that's why he is what he is, you know.
You play an awful lot of cricket in those days, 1980, what with the John Player League on a Sunday, Benson Hedges, Gillette Cup, 22
Yeah.
championship games. There's a lot of travelling as well.
Yeah, we did play 22 days in a row, which I found a bit cumbersome because in South Africa, in those days, we sort of ODI cricket had popped in. I think it was a 40-over game, day-night. So we only played eight games in a season. So you come and do 22, and I'm bowling at, where am I bowling? At Taunton against Gavaskar. It's not an easy task. And I'm bowling, I don't know, about my fifth over. I'm obviously tired and just had bowled enough. Brearley, in his typical way, he could motivate you in lots of different ways, came down the wicket to me and said, "How are you going?" I said, "I'm fine." He said, "I must tell you, I'm thinking of bringing on John Emery from your side for a bit of pace." So I did get Gavaskar out the next over because I was a bit hut full, as they say in South Africa.
But how different was it bowling in England to South Africa?
That's a whole different battle. It's just totally different. The wickets are different. The length is different. The difference is about that much, I reckon, because the ball moves and you have to pitch it up more. So that takes time. And of course, bowling at Lords, you have to completely change your line. So if you're bowling from the pavilion end, you've got to bowl. I'm used to bowling on the inside lacquer of the off stump. That was always my line. And so I had to bowl that much outside off stump, bowling down from the pavilion end. And if you're bowling up from whatever they call it nowadays, most probably the
Still the nursery end, yeah.
Nursery end, you had to pitch it on middle and leg. That took about 3 weeks to sort out. You know, because I bowl my normal length and you'll get clipped to the leg side. And you think, how on earth did that happen? And then you go and play at other grounds. What other grounds? I mean, I liked Uxbridge. Hove was fabulous, except if you had to bowl uphill. You know, Wayne always bowled downhill, like Mike Proctor when I played for Natal. So that's why I'm bored. I had to go uphill all the time. But the experience of England is totally different to wickets and stuff. The experience of England is you're dealing with people that it's their profession. In South Africa, it's not our profession. All of us had jobs. You know, this was our hobby. So in South Africa, you talk a lot. So my first game ever was against Eastern Province. Barry Verswak gets hit in the head. There's blood all over the crease. He is paralyzed. He can't talk for about 2 weeks. He gets hauled off. I go to the wicket in the blood. Peter Pollock was pretty fearsome then. Bowled 3 bounces with me in a row. And the only people I knew in the Eastern Province side were my varsity mates, Dusty Biggs and Arthur Short. So I looked up at them and just smiled nervously. And Peter Pollock turned around at that time. I was laughing because he couldn't get the ball over my head because I always played it up here. So my first 7 balls were bounces from Peter. And I was very lucky that game. I went from 0 for 52 to 4 for 54, I think it was, at the end. So I was accepted within the team. And Patchy, in those days, you know, you'll be changed, got into change rooms. He just said to me, "Vince, I was quite impressed by what you did. If you ever need advice, give me a shout." And the next game was in Pietermaritzburg, and I happened to go in because you're staying at the same hotel. And he said, "Come and talk to me." So I sat next to him, and he became one of my 2 mentors, him and Trevor Goddard. So there was a lot of, we didn't have coaches, we didn't have physios, we didn't have doctors, we didn't have medical aid. You know, we had a manager who sometimes got the team wrong. You know, we didn't have any of that. So we had to self-coach, which I think is fantastic because you start to learn your game, you start to learn the game of your players, and you start to appreciate what motivates them and doesn't. You don't wait for the coach or the captain to do that. I used to feel sorry for your fast bowler Wood. What is his first name?
Mark Wood.
Baldwin. Sorry?
Mark Wood.
Mark Wood, yeah. He'll be walking back to the mark, and there would be Broad on the one side, Anderson on the other, and sometimes the captain. And someone said, what would you do if that happened to you? I'd tell him to bugger off. You know, and to understand that, do you remember that shambles of a run out of Lance Klusener and Alan
Oh, the
Donald
World Cup 99.
match, right?
Yeah.
So Steve Waugh's the captain. On the 10th year anniversary of that, Steve was asked by a journalist, what did you say to the bowler on the third ball? Because he hit for 2 fours in a row. It was just 1 run to win. It was a no-brainer. He said, Steve Waugh said, I beg your pardon? What do you mean, what did I say to the bowler? He said, but surely you would have given him some instructions. He said, don't be stupid. He's the bowler. He knows what to bowl. I'm not a bowler. So the game has moved from this one of self-exploration, this one of getting to understand self, this one of, and I'll tell you another trick we used to do. Titchmouth at first at keeper, Barry Richards at first slip. Who was second? Someone like, I don't know, Pat Trimble at second, and very experienced players. So if a guy came to the wicket, we didn't have TV, you had never seen bat before, and they would look at the way he stood, how he held the bat. So you run up to bowl, and I don't know what you call it in England, we call it you mick it, you stop, you pretend to bowl, you stop. And then they can see whether he moved, where his bat was, and then you'd have a mid-wicket conference, and you'd say, and Barry was normally the best at it, he'll say, listen, this guy's obviously a back foot player, his right hand's round the side, so we'll just change the field a bit, etc. That's how we learned. That's why I think I've got a nephew who's a very good player, played for SA under 19. And it's very difficult for them when they bowl. He's a fast bowler because they're told how to bowl. So you get into the wicket, the guy moves down leg stump, right? As they do sometimes. No one comes down the wicket like Chris Wilkins did, which scares the hell out of you. They move to the left. And there are 3 balls you can bowl. If you're courageous, you can bowl a slightly slow delivery on the length of middle stump, or you pitch it up as a Yorker on the off stump, or you bowl on his pads. There are only 3 deliveries for that. You don't have anything else. If you bowl a bouncer, their momentum's coming forward, so they'll whack you. But that you work out yourself. So I do get worried that everyone's overcoached and overtold. And so you look at the fields nowadays and you can see the batsman looking up and saying, well, he's got that, and that. So that's the ball he's going to bowl. There's very seldom a double bluff.
Roll baller Alonzo Ball for Buzzballs. Ready to go cocktails. Take 12.
Buzzballs just dropped their biggest blue balls.
Script says Biggie's blue balls, Lonzo. Take 13.
Blue balls just dropped their biggest buzzballs. Ugh.
Let's try a vocal exercise.
Buzzballs, biggies, blue balls, buzzballs, biggies, blue balls.
Big balls just dropped. Get blue balls this season with Buzzballs.
Please drink responsibly. Buzzballs available in spirit, wine, and malt. 15% alcohol by volume. Buzzballs LLC, Carrollton, Texas.
This episode is brought to you by Chevy Silverado. When it's time for you to ditch the blacktop and head off-road, do it in a truck that says no to nothing. The Chevy Silverado Trail Boss. Get the rugged capability of its Z71 suspension and 2-inch factory lift. Plus, impressive torque and towing capacity thanks to an available Duramax 3-liter turbo diesel engine. Where other trucks call it quits, you'll just be getting started. Visit Chevy.com to learn more.
I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
Getting back to 1980,
yes,
you bowled plenty of overs. That's very interesting. You actually bowled 642 overs in this county championship season.
Okay.
85 wickets, an average of only 14.72, and a memorable season for Middlesex, winning 2 trophies.
Yep.
How much of a difference did Mike Brearley make as the leader?
Well, I've always said to Brearley that he couldn't bat very well or bowl very well, but he won more games for England than anyone else. I've been on record as saying I think he's the best captain that ever lived. And quite a few people come back to me saying, no, it's Ray Illingworth. And I'm not sure that's true, personally. I think he read people. He took hugely courageous decisions. If you think of him dropping Mike Smith to bring in Paul Downton, and at the same time dropping Ian Gould, who was a very, very good wicketkeeper, a batsman, who was the top wicketkeeper batsman at the time he was dropped from the Middlesex side. Why? Because he felt that the only person who could captain the side when he left would have been Paul Downton. I'm sure he's written that somewhere. And then who else did he drop? He dropped Mike Selvey for Yoza. So he dropped 3 English players at times when we were doing okay. I think when he dropped them, I think we had lost 2 T20s. If my memory is right, we didn't lose a ODI or a championship match for 2 months. We should have won all 4 that year. We messed up the T20 and messed up the semi-final of the
B&H,
B&H's, and that was in my fault. I hit a full toss off Willie down someone's throat. Gatting was very cross with me. I think we should have won that. But Mike just knew. I think the only person Mike battled with, as Gat battled with, was Phil Edmonds, because Phil wanted to do his own thing. But Phil was engaging. In our Gillette Cup, he was the best 12th man I've ever seen. So even though he had this sort of quirky side to him, which everyone knows, difficult to captain. If you don't put the field his way, he won't bowl it properly. But as a 12th man, having been dropped, to not play in a Gillette Cup final, he was fantastic. When Roland got to the wicket, I think he was about 120 for 4. We were chasing 217 or something. And nerves were a little bit tight. And you had Jackman bowling as the best season of his life, 120 wickets. You had Sylvester Clarke there. You had all sorts of people who could seriously bowl. And, Phil was just going around saying, everything's under control. So whenever I talk about that story, and I talk about Butcher's great innings, Brearley always has to remind me that he was the other side with 96 not out, which one's inclined to forget in T20 cricket or these sort of crickets, because you want to see the 6s and the 4s. You forget about the guy who's holding it together. And he was fascinating, true. And I think Mike would like me to say this. He's quirky, Mike. He's not this sort of academic, actuarial bloke, he just wanders around thinking all the time. He enjoys the humor, He's a very, very good man.
So during that season, who was the best batsman you bowled to?
I don't answer those sort of questions. I think
you were playing a county championship was very strong in those days, though, wasn't it?
It was strong. They were good players. We had Glenn Turner who played well. Gavaskar scored centuries off us. Those are the two that stand out. I'm just thinking of it irritated me because he was one of my referees that I didn't kick Chris Broad out. He was good. But Gavaskar and Glenn Turner has this very funny grip, He sort of held it around the side. And he played outrageous shots, and so did Gavaskar. And, I remember Gavaskar played a flawless 100. He managed to win the game somehow against us at Taunton. He got to 96, and he hadn't put a foot wrong. And he played and missed at me. And I went down the wicket. I said, don't you want your 100, you horrible little man. And he just laughed. Yeah, it's just, we played it we just had fun, because that's what cricket should be.
But in those days, it was like the IPL in those days with the standard of players that were playing. When you had Rice, Hadley, everyone was playing, weren't they?
Yeah, and we had serious players. And we had serious fun. So, I mean, the one thing the IPL has done is bring people from different countries together. And I think that's really important. I had I'm now a very close friend called Dominic Coggle. But, he played for Transvaal and I played for Natal. And I was told he had no heart at all, which is absolute rubbish. But, you go onto the field within your back mind, and then when you get to know him, do you know what a fine man he is? It's just interesting. I tell you who scored a fantastic 100 against us was Proctor. We should have won that game easy. He came and scored 124 flawless on a turning track against Edmonds and Embry. Absolutely magnificent. We should have won that game walking away. We didn't. We lost it easy. So we had lots of those sort of matches. Kepler scored 154 against us to save the game. But, it's not as if Kepler's electrifying. He just stayed there and played a good knock.
Vince, let's hear from one of your Middlesex colleagues, Roland Butcher, a regular on this podcast, and let's hear what you had to say. What did you know about Vincent van der Bijl when he arrived in the UK to play for Middlesex?
Well, what I knew about Vincent was basically, what we were told when we heard he was coming. Obviously, we'd have also checked to see that in South Africa he was an outstanding fast bowler at the end of his career. I know Middlesex, through Mike Brearley, had tried to get Vince to come to Middlesex before 1980. But obviously, his commitments in South Africa meant that really he couldn't come. But he managed to get the time away from his job in South Africa to come and play in 1980. And what an inspired signing that was, really. He was absolutely amazing. I mean, as a fast bowler, and if you think that this was at the end of his career, I hate to think just how good he was, maybe in the middle of his career, because he was a different class.
What were his qualities as a bowler?
Well, his qualities as a bowler, I mean, he obviously he was a big man. There's no doubt about that. He was a big, tall guy, strong, had great belief in his bowling, very aggressive, swung the ball, he seamed the ball at a high pace, relentless in, the length that he bowled, didn't bowl many bad balls, hated runs for him, truly top class bowler. I mean, of the highest order. He really was one of the best bowlers that I have seen, even at an advanced stage. He was a real credit to the team. And as you know, that year we won the doubles. So, and he was a big part of that.
He made a big difference that side because he was opening the bowling with Wayne Daniel and you had a test bowling attack, didn't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, when you've got, Wayne Daniel was, top class overseas professional, and then you bring in someone like Vincent van der Bijl, and you've got Mike Shelby and others, and then you had the spinners. I can't think of any better bowling lineups in England county cricket. I mean, those five together were exceptional.
It's good to hear then from the Hoover.
Yeah, it is. Obviously it's very flattering, but let's look at the real facts. The real facts are we had an incredible attack. And you bowl, I used to bowl here with Mike Proctor in my team, or Pat Trimble, who were great bowlers. And I was different. I was tall, so I got bounce. And I suppose my two qualities was accuracy and bounce on the one side, and the other was I sort of got to know quite early on what the batsman didn't like. I liked the mental dominance on the field. That was the fun part. It wasn't about and we used to plan a lot. But Wayne Daniel, oh, what a man. I mean, I played 3 friendlies, and Butch wasn't in the team yet, okay? So I played 3 friendlies. I got 1 wicket, a sort of RC wicket, back pad, a short leg, against club sides, And people must have been thinking, sure, who is this guy, And then I'm lucky enough to get 4 wickets against Notts, and Wayne gets 4 wickets, but it's the first wicket that count. First of all, I bowled Patsy Harris as my first ball of the season, and I bowled a perfect delivery. It's just pitches middle and off, moves away, misses about a yard. Brearley looks up quite surprised. I look at Brearley and say something like, I can bowl. Go back to my mark. And then I get a wicket eventually. I can't remember how long it took. And Wayne Daniel ran from fine leg and jumped into my arms. Now, you think of the significance of that. It was I knew then I was there. I knew then I'd been accepted by the team. And that is, if you've ever read a book called Fit by Warren Kenner, who's a sports psychologist in Australia, he talks about fit. Doesn't matter how good you are, you've got to fit into the team. And he talks about people who are good strikers at soccer who can't fit in the team, however good they are. And that's so true. Having Wayne there, and then get on very well with John Embry, loved Selv, got on well with Gat, Yozza was a delight. Just everything was good, so you felt comfortable. And then we started to win. So you get treated a bit like royalty wherever you go, to be honest. And it's got to be said. It's not as if we were losers. So people are saying, oh, here they come again. They haven't won a game for 3 matches. We were different, and we had a fantastic team. So I think to have Wayne at the one side, Mike on the other, please. You might know the story of, we go down to play a 50-over game, I think it was in those days, against Sussex at Hove. And I go to the wicket. God, we're only about 120 for 7. Garth LaRue, Imran Khan, they had a good team. And Jeff Arnold, they had a serious team. I managed to put together, 18 or something. We managed to get to about 170. But the last over was key, because Imran Khan was bowling downwind. And in those days, things were, you knew what was going to happen. I knew my first couple of balls from Garth LaRue were going to be bounces. It was boring in that way. But for some reason, Imran decided to bowl bounces at Wayne. So we used to call Wayne Guinness, because black as the ace of spades with a white helmet, And so he would go out to bat, and he was bowled 6 vicious bounces. And I've never sat in a dressing room before, ever, when the Middlesex guys are shouting out, give him another one, which he did. Wayne comes in to bowl. The first or second wickets he takes, I catch Paul Parker above my head at mid-on, and he's played a backward defensive. Wayne got 6 for 14. I got 1 wicket. I managed to get Imran out, bowling into the wind uphill. But we nailed them good and proper. So one has to understand that I was the same when I played for Natal. Yes, I got wickets, but I had good people around me. And I bowled a lot, because in Natal I was both the stock and the shock bowler, which was an unusual role to play. Procky was coming to the end of his career at a sore knee, so he was bowling off his more, and he was quick and he was medium pace. So things were changing and different. So I think when people look at stats, I'm not mad about stats, personally. Because people say, look at your average. I said, well, look at everyone else's average of that period. If you weren't under 20, you couldn't bowl. Whereas today, if you're under 20, you're a genius. If today you're under 30, you can bowl. But, I came back from that season, funnily enough. The next year, I had my best season ever for Natal. I had a bowling average of 9.5. But that's because of all the lessons I learned in England. Because you're bowling all day, you're chatting to other people. You're talking about different tactics. You're talking about all sorts of things. Whereas in South Africa, We didn't have coaches. We didn't particularly need coaches, but we were having fun. This was an amateur game. So it was a very different experience from that point of view. And your umpires were much better, obviously. Our umpires were manipulable. Some of yours were, but not too many.
Was it always going to be just that 1 year? I know you played one game in 1981.
I was in between jobs. Okay, so I packed up teaching. I accepted a job with Wigan's team as a sales rep, knowing nothing about paper. And at the end of that season, I look back on it now and I think perhaps it was a stupid move. One of the guys who was on the advisory board came up to me and said, "What do we have to pay you to stay another year?" But Bev had fallen pregnant with our third. It was a ginormous year. You couldn't ask for more. And to have Bev come across, stay in London with 3 kids just wasn't an option, really. And I made a commitment to the company. I was for 1 year. And in fact, the MD later said, "Listen, he would have given it to me if I wanted it." But it just wasn't right. You know, if you give a handshake commitment, it's solid. And it wouldn't have been right for the family. We had fun.
You did play one game, didn't you? Played against the champion county in 1981.
Yeah, very irritating. Gower got 100, which irritated me because he became a good friend. He was, I suppose on his best day, he would have been like Lara on his best day, Clive Lloyd, Gary Sobers. These left-handers when they play. Lee Irvin as well was a hell of a player. Graham Pollock. They have a freedom. They have a flow to their game. Like Stark bowling. If you watch Stark bowling or Trent Bolt, who I absolutely adore, you watch them bowl and you see the flow of their left hand. When you see a right-hander bowl, you know it's a vup, vup, and you're going over. You see, the first time I saw Stark bowl, I was just taken aback. And Trent Bolt, well, he bowls like a teenager. He looks like a teenager. He's my favorite. I love him just because he enjoys his game.
You retired then from first-class cricket in 1983. Were you ready to retire then? Was it injury?
This was quite early, but I've been made sales manager of the Transvaal branch of Wigan's team. And the only way I can describe this honestly is to say, when I was a sales rep, I expected my sales manager to know me backwards. I expected him to understand what motivated me. I expected him to pull me up if I wasn't doing well, congratulate me. I expect to know every aspect of everything I did. And suddenly I had 6 guys under me who would expect the same. And I only made the decision at the beginning of the following year, which I think is the only way you can do it. I just felt I couldn't give the sales team, I'd developed a relationship by then, that commitment. And I wasn't quite there, The only game I played in South Africa, funnily enough, was the Clive Rice benefit. And my first 2 balls were wides. One was a bit sneakily given by the umpire, and the second was a wide. And Lee Barnard, who's a very funny bloke, played cricket and rugby for Transvaal. He says to Tish Smith, my mate, he says, "This is the classic case of a man playing one game too many," which is a lovely comment. So I was ready to give up, even though I could have played. Now, I honestly think you can bowl first-class cricket, not test, up to the age of 41. I've got no doubt about that if you keep yourself in shape, as many people have proven. But you have to play and play and play. That's where IPL gets confusing, because you get the guys who retire and they just play IPL. Then after 3 years, they have to go because they haven't got the continuity of the game.
You were only 35, was it, when you retired?
33, I think. Might have been 34.
And then it was business then with...
It was business, and then I've never been one motivated by money, really. And I always loved cricket, so I became high performance director of Cricket South Africa. And then I became the guy in charge of the global umpires and referees in Dubai for the ICC. for 7 years, which was fantastic.
You enjoyed getting back into a cricketing job?
Well, the interesting thing was that the first time I got to Australia was to go with the South African team. I spoke at a breakfast with Taylor. You and I were the speakers. And I opened by saying, I've eventually got to Australia a little bit late because I was due to go there in 71. And it was a way of me getting involved in international cricket, which I'd never had the opportunity to. And then the ICC was really a way. And to understand the difficulties of being on the executive in the ICC. The fact that you are an executive, you just execute the board's decisions, whether you like it or not. So, and that was quite difficult at times. So you had to influence the play as many corners as you possibly could. And we had a terrific executive under Dave Richardson. We just did, Jeff Allardyce became my boss. I worked with Simon Tarfor well. We had the ICC. We had a very good bunch of referees. I think, DRS came into being. We helped baseball with their system. We helped rugby with the words they would use. And that was often Simon, David. I was like a huntlanger, like a helper at that stage because they didn't have the experience as a referee or as an umpire. And we had a very good bunch. We had Gouldy. We had, you look at England, we had Gouldy, we had, Illy, and we had Kettles. And then we had Marais. We had great umpires like Rod Tucker. We had, Aleem Dar. Really, it was a privilege.
And you were also on the MCC World Cricket Committee?
Yeah, that was a great honour. My dad was an MCC member and all that sort of stuff. So when I was invited as an honorary member, it really moved me. I wrote quite a long letter, which Brearley mocked me about. He said, "Get over yourself." But it was important for me. I've got a photograph, and it's not really a study, it's a utility room behind me, of my dad walking on for Oxford with Ellen Melville, captain South Africa, and Tapion Smith, who scored 100 before lunch, and played full-back for England, funny enough. So, the MCC meant a lot to me. And I enjoyed working on the World Cricket Committee because I worked with great minds. So obviously Mike Brearley, and then there were a whole series of Pontings and Brendan McCullum at the end, Shane Warne. And I think we felt the same. Test cricket is going, in my view, not really anywhere. And our view, time and time again, every time we meet, was cut the test playing nations down to 6 or 7. Make them iconic. Everyone's going to watch the iconic series. Who wants to watch South Africa play Zimbabwe? If Zimbabwe want to play a test match, that's fine. And if you want to play a test match without DRS, which costs so much, I think they should be allowed to play that. But to give people test playing capability, and we haven't got one test match in the next 12 months in South Africa. We're playing in the final in June. That shows the logic of what's going on at the moment. How we got to a final itself is illogical. But there it is. So there's something that's always been happening in the state of Denmark. It's money, money, money. That's all it is. Have you seen an IPL game live?
No.
I've seen 2. I've only lasted 8 overs. The noise is so horrific. The focus is on nothing. It's just, and I know it's good for the game, and I love IPL because it brings youngsters into it. That's its great value.
You are listening to the Paddock and the Pavilion with Stephen Wallis. Don't forget, you can find this show along with our archive of over 300 episodes on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, or on our YouTube channel. So do you worry about the future of Test cricket?
totally. I've been worried about it for 10 years. I think everyone is. You know, what are your big matches? We have to get Pakistan playing against India. That's iconic. New Zealand, Australia. South Africa, Australia, South Africa, India, South Africa, England. England, Australia. England, New Zealand, England, India. So I think those 5 are quite easy to choose, in my view, would be, and they have to want to play cricket. They have to want to play Test cricket. I think you have to ask the players, do they want to play Test cricket? Or do they just want the money? So in one of the, no names, no pectoral, but one of the MCC World Cricket Committee meetings, a guy I respect deeply said, you know, in the old days, to play 100 Test matches was a biggie. Now they get to 20 and I think, okay, that's enough. So Test cricket itself, whatever the players say, is being undermined quietly because the money on offer, I mean, I really admire some, I don't know, people who go off and play. But I don't know who they play for. You know, so if you ask me who or all the sides de Kock plays for, I couldn't tell you. I might know the IPL side. Du Plessis, I wouldn't have a clue who he plays for because he now even changed in his IPL team. So it doesn't mean anything to me, no. Doesn't mean anything to him, only he can answer that.
So returning to South Africa, they're in the World Test Championship final. What do you think their chances against Australia?
Well, the one thing we have got are a few bowlers. You know, Rabada has to be one of the best bowlers you've seen. And by that stage, I hope our batters, or suddenly Rickleton's coming to the party. Pavuma's always been a Test cricketer. You know, you've got Miller, who I would pick in a Test match. Because I think he's most probably our best player. We've got players. We've got Raj, you know, we've got old Maharaj, but we don't really have a leg spinner. We have some all-rounders who still have to prove themselves a bit. We have Janssen who can, you know, on his day, he's lethal, both with the bat and ball and with the fielding. We've got the players. And I think in Shukri Khanna, we actually have the coach. He's managed to gel this team together out of nowhere. You know, we took a seaside to New Zealand in the last 12 months. And he used that to bring on people. So if I was Australia, I'd be saying, we should win this, but you never know South Africa. South Africa against Australia, look at our history against them. We love fighting Australia because they're very similar to us. They have the same psyche as us.
Just getting up to date, you are the founder and the MD of the MasiSports project. Can you let listeners know more about that?
Okay, well, when I retired from the ICC, I got double cancer. So for 2 months, it was pretty touch and go. And I've always been involved in township work for a long time. And so when I came out of it and suddenly I was healthy again after a year, someone asked me to go into a school in Masipumalelo, which is a township just down the road from Fishhook, where I live, and it's near Simonstown. People know Simonstown, people know Komaki, who are English. So there was this township, and I went and sat down at the netball court, waiting for neighbour Jonas to join me to have a discussion, because they want to introduce cricket there. And I looked up and there was a field, quite a big field. It was so bad that no one could play on it. There was a motley netball court, and there in those days there were 1,350 kids in the school. They're now 1,900. And I looked at the neighbour and I said, why haven't these fields been developed? And so what had happened in my mind, I sort of not had a vision, I just could see what's possible. So I went to see the headmaster and I said, listen, this is what I think I can do for you. If he was here, he'll tell the story. He thought I was smoking grass or boom, whatever you call daka. He thought, here's another whitey coming here promising the world. And I said, the only thing I can promise you is, and I learned this in Asia for the ICC, you have to be there for at least 18 months before people actually trust you. So don't go in there with promises and disappear, even if you've done those promises within a year, because they forget about you quickly. So I've been there 8 years. So we've developed a full range of sports facilities, both at the high school and the junior school. We've got 13 coaches. We've got 7 sports. We've got 5 cultural activities. We've got life skills. We've got education programs that fit in with the school. And we work with other NPOs. We've got 25 partners. We were started by the MCC. So I go to my first MCC meeting, which I only was reflecting on it the other day. And I looked up and all these really heavy hitters of world cricket. And I know that most of them have got their foundations. I said, how many of you actually work in your foundations? And they said, I can know we raise money. I said, what about us all committing to starting a foundation which you work at? And the next day they said, okay, big boy, you do it. And the MC World Cricket Committee gave me some money. I started up capital. That's how I started. So MCC are very close to me. And then I just sort of moved from there. And because of the people I surrounded myself with the same sort of vision, we've started to move to take a kid from grade R the whole way through to grade 12, and then to place them in an employable space. This is an horrific township. It's 50,000 people in half a square kilometre. HIV/A is 25% of adults. 30% of the high school kids do not have an adult when they go home, child labor, child assault. You've got sexual harassment, drugs, etc. And so what we're doing is trying to produce the next generation, one after the other, with a more positive approach to their own future and therefore the future of the country. And it's starting to work. And we've been very lucky with our sponsors like Judith Nielsen in Australia, the MCC, and many people who have helped us, many individuals. So, and we have 25 NPOs we partner with. We don't have the expertise, for example, to do dance or art. So we bring in a partner and we pay them a bit to do that, and they do it for us. We just employed a social worker to help teenagers at the high school navigate this horrific teenage life in a township. And so, but we don't know enough about being a social worker, but there's an Natuta Health Foundation does, who's across the road from us. So they are our partners and they look after the social worker. So we surrounded ourselves with experts with a vision. And we want that vision to be replicated throughout South Africa. One stat that might surprise you is that 94% of schools in South Africa do not have sport after school. 1,350 do. And we won 4 Rugby World Cups. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? If we get this right, and if our governments, all our governments nowadays, because it's geopolitical situation is so ridiculous, can actually focus on the next generations and not on getting elected the next time they are voted for. What we could see in South Africa, I really think we could see miraculous Rainbow Nation stuff that Desmond Tutu and Mandela spoke about. So that's what I do. And it's, for me, it's fantastic. It's given me great purpose.
And it keeps you busy still.
Oh, yes, it does.
Well, thank you very much, Vince, for being on the Paddock and the Pavilion.
Pleasure.
What would you give now to be bowling at the Pavilion end at Lord's for Middlesex, taking you back to 1980?
Oh, lots. As long as you don't say, what would you give me for bowling in the IPL? I love Rabada's comment when he said, they shouldn't call this cricket, they should call it batting. Which is, it hits the nail on the head.
I'm sure you'd get a good IPL contract if they had the IPL in 1980.
No, I can't field well enough, I don't think. Graham Pollock and I used to talk about that. Thank you very much for having me.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
You can save up to $850 at Mattress Warehouse right now. And trust us when we say that'll go a long way. Visit mattresswarehouse.com.